Come to order if we could, please. Mr. Chairman Fisher, would you lead us in the invocation, please, sir?
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we give thanks for this beautiful day that you've given us and give thanks for all of our many blessings that you have shared with us. And we also give thanks for this county in which we live and this state and for the United States and where we live. We'd ask your presence with all of those that are serving in our armed forces to protect our freedoms, and also ask for your care and watching over all those in our fire and rescue and our sheriff's department that protect us and keep us safe. And at this time of the year, we ask your blessing on all those that are graduating from schools, public, private, higher education, as they reach changes in their life and moving forward. Be with them and guide and direct them. We ask for your presence with us tonight and be with us in our decision-making for the citizens of Frederick County. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Sergeant Lofton, would you lead us in the pledge, please, sir?
Please, would you stand and face the flag for our pledge? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adoption of the agenda, are there any proposed changes?
Not that I know of.
All right, how would the board like to handle that?
Move for approval.
To approve, is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Adopt the agenda, consent agenda. Tentative agenda items for consent are tabs C and D.
Move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
To approve, is there a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Tabs C and D are approved under consent. Did anyone sign up, Mr. Tibbs?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, Ms. Gray?
That's okay.
Never know which end it's on. Go ahead, please.
Dodie Stottlemyre wants to speak regarding the Chantel cell tower.
We're not considering that item this evening, but you can speak to it if you'd like. Actually, you shouldn't, but we'll let you.
Thank you.
Agenda items only, not subject to public hearing. We're not considering it all this evening. It's not on our agenda. But go ahead.
Okay, good. I'd still like to speak on it.
3 minutes, please.
Okay. My name is Dodie Stottlemyre, and I'm from the Shawnee Magisterial District. I just kind of wanted to address the issue of the postponement for the Chantel cell tower, which is supposed to be located at the Bowman Library. The perception exists in the county that the governing body cares nothing about the citizenry of the county. Part of the reason may exist in the circumstances surrounding the cell tower at public hearing. The Planning Commission recommended to deny the tower. 12 or so people spoke out against it, and yet Supervisor Fisher makes a motion to postpone it. Now, I've sat here and I've heard the board wrangle over ordinances to keep the option for public hearings included in many areas that they have jurisdiction over. I kind of have to wonder why.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
That's it?
That's it? All right. Thank you. Board of Supervisors comments, are there any? All right. Brings us to committee appointments. Social Services Board, you have progress?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we had two possible candidates. One candidate has since taken another opportunity, and so we will be recommending the candidate that Supervisor McCann Slaughter had proposed at our next meeting.
Thank you, sir. Board of Building Appeals. Assume we're still looking.
We're still looking on
So,
that, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Historic Resources Advisory Board, OPECA.
We're still, have a lot of people with interest, and I just haven't had time to sit down and interview with each of them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, nothing in May, and then Historic Resources Advisory Board, Gainsborough in June.
I'll have you, someone next meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Planning Commission, OPECA.
Have not had any luck with that,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman.
Chester Regional Airport.
Mr. Chairman, I would move for reappointment of David C. Reichert to the Airport Authority.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
And there's a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you, sir. Are we still waiting for a response from Top of Virginia?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That will be at some future development for the Development Impact Model Oversight Committee. All right, that brings us through committee appointments. Request of the commissioner for refunds.
Yes, sir, we have two. One is to authorize the treasurer to refund M Express LLC, otherwise known as Middletown Exxon, the amount of $2,583.42 for business license taxes in 2017. The refund results from the adjustment of business license taxes after a merger of gas stations. So you need to approve the refund and make the corresponding supplemental appropriation.
All right, how would the board like to handle this one?
I make a,
Chairman, I move for go ahead, Ms. Slaughter.
no, go ahead.
Move for approval and also authorization, appropriation for $2,583.42.
Motion to approve and a supplemental appropriation. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Is there any discussion? Supervisor Ewing?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Chair votes aye and the motion carries.
Okay, and the second one is a request to authorize the treasurer to refund Rutherford Crossing Dialysis, otherwise known as Total Renal Care Incorporated, in the amount of $41,652.65 for business license taxes in 2016. The refund results from the adjustment of business license taxes because of incorrect reporting of receipts by the taxpayer.
So how would the board like to handle this one?
I'd like to make a motion for approval of the $41,652.65 and the corresponding supplemental appropriation.
Appropriation and the motion, is there a second?
Second.
The second, is there any discussion? Anyone? Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Ewing?
Aye.
Chair votes aye and the motion carries. All right, that'll bring us to the Public Works Committee report.
Mr. Chairman, Public Works met on Tuesday, April 25th at 8 o'clock in the morning in the Public Works Conference Room. One item recommended to the board for this evening has to deal with the right-of-way and utility easements on Sulphur Springs Road. VDOT's requesting the necessary easements for right-of-way on county-owned property for the improvement project for Sulphur Spring Road. And what the Public Works Committee is recommending is a motion that they would like the board to make to send this to public hearing for the acquisition or change of property, in other words, to
Okay.
give the proper easements that are needed for the right-of-way for the Sulphur Spring Road's improvements. That would be my motion, to go to public hearing.
So we have a motion to forward to public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, is there any discussion?
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Supervisor Dunn.
Mr. Fisher, at Sulphur Spring, does that also include the intersection of Sulphur Spring Road and Greenwood Road, so that if in the future that has to be adjusted, it can be? Do you know?
If you look at what in the, along the access, it goes past Greenwood Road where part of that easement is required. It's part of that process.
So that would not interfere with a potential fix of that intersection
Oh,
at a future
no,
point in time?
in fact, it would be an improvement to,
Okay.
It's on-
And the other question I just want to ask is, this easement would not then prohibit the widening of that road or anything of that nature from Route 50 out to the landfill, correct?
no, this is to allow them the access to widen it, to have the right-of-way to do the necessary improvement.
Further discussion? Anyone? All right, forwarding to public hearing. All those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, no. We'll forward that to public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my report.
Thank you, sir. Brings us to Transportation Committee report. Supervisor Lofton?
Yes, sir. Transportation Committee met on April 24th 2017, we have two items requiring action. The first is Security Drive. There was a request by the Navy Federal Credit Union to seek to abandon a portion of the right-of-way and also adopt a shorter section into the state system of highways. This is to accommodate their expansion out there. The committee considered their request, viewed all the information, and if someone has any questions, I'm sure Mr. Bishop would be happy to explain all the ins and outs and the details if you would like.
All right, any questions of Mr. Bishop? Okay, apparently not.
Then, if there are no questions, then I would move that we adopt a resolution asking the clerk to advertise the board's intent to abandon a section of Security Drive.
So you've heard the motion, is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
A second. Is there any discussion? Anyone? All right, Supervisor Slaughter.
Aye.
Supervisor Wells.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher.
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn. Supervisor Ewing.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries.
Our second item for action is another similar action, and that is Hood Way. The Hood Company has asked that the road from Route 11 back to their facility be abandoned in order for them to facilitate changes to their site to improve traffic circulation. Staff noted that in most cases, a cul-de-sac that provides access to a single user typically is not allowed into the state system, but Hoodway was built using economic development access funds, which automatically cause the resulting roadway to be adopted into the state system. One caveat to that is Mr. Rhodes on the committee noted that the parcels fronting Route 11 and Hood Way should either be consolidated with the primary Hood parcel or receive deeded access to Hood Way in order to prevent future undesired and potentially unsafe additional entrances onto Route 11. Now, again, Mr. Bishop is here. He could probably put that up on the screen if you'd like to see exactly what we're talking about. But as has been explained, there are three parcels there. The entrance to Hood and a parcel to the north and the south of that entranceway. If we were to abandon that roadway and make it a private roadway without accommodating those parcels, they could come back in and ask for access to Route 11, which in my mind would certainly be a challenge, as Route 11 is already, I'll say, traffic challenge at this point. So what this will do is it will put us in the formula of making these parcels access Hood Way instead of having access on Route 11. Like I say, I'm sure Mr. Bishop
Questions
can
for
explain
Mr.
it.
Bishop, is everyone?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, I mean, if he has a map that can lay this out, I'd be interested in seeing.
Show us that, John, please.
seeing that.
We had that very discussion when Hood was built. Thank you, sir.
I do apologize, I don't have one that I can put on the screen. I do
Okay.
have it in your packet.
Okay, so if everyone could access that, that'd be good.
John, I think it's on page 97, if that helps you any.
There's a different thing that's on the
Okay.
iPad that's attached to the projector than
Well,
what's
I'm
in
just
your
saying
packet.
for the committee
But
sitting
yes,
here.
Yes,
Understand that you can't put it on the screen.
apologize for that.
Page 97.
So Mrs. McCann's Slaughter is in this picture, Route 11 at the top.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's the.
Route 11
you-
will be on
Route
the
11 is
left-hand
On the
side.
on the
left-hand
left, on the image. And then Hoodway goes from west to east, right through the center of the image, of course, accessing Hood Dairy. The parcels that Mr. Lofton is referring to are to the north and the south of Hood Way. Those are both owned by Hood Dairy. However, they are separate parcels, which under this action, if potentially they were to be sold in the future and not have access to the then private Hood Way, VDOT would not be enabled to deny them access to Route 11. VDOT has a fairly broad latitude to control access to the public road system. However, what they do not have the power to do is to landlock or deny access to a property. And that's the eventuality that we're trying to avoid.
They were actually called out parcels back in the day
Yes.
when they were building that facility.
So again, what we're asking for, what would be our intent would be to, if we abandon Hood Way, that we would guarantee access, needed access to the two parcels to the north and the south of Hood Way.
Now, since the Transportation Committee's action, I have been in contact with Denny Dunlap, who is the engineer of record for Hood Dairy in this action, and he has indicated he does not expect that to be a problem. And as he works through that process, we would have that solidified before asking you to take any final action on this.
We would want to see that accomplished
Yes,
before
sir.
it came back to us. Yes. All right. You all okay?
Yeah, so this is just to go to a public hearing on this issue.
Yes.
No, not public hearing. The resolution, I will move to approve the resolution asking the clerk to advertise our intent to abandon Hood Way.
Right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And so in abandoning Hood Way, it would allow Hood to still have access. It would not prohibit somebody else who owned that land to have access, and you'd still have access to Route 11. Is that correct?
I think Mr. Bishop may be able to speak to your question a little better than I, but if we abandon that and make it a private roadway, we would, at that point, when we decided that we were going to take that action, we would take steps to make sure that those parcels, north and south, did have deeded access to that private roadway. Mr. Bishop?
That is correct. That was the intent of the Transportation Committee, which has been communicated back to the representatives of Hood Dairy. So we would definitely be placing a spotlight on that when you brought this issue up again after the advertising period, if that had not taken place. But of course, we'll also clarify whether it has or has not taken place, because that does need to be included.
And just one more question, Mr. Chairman.
Sir.
Is there anybody that is objective for any reason, or is there anybody that's raised concerns for any reason?
Thus far, no. Our early concerns were that perhaps VDOT would have a concern since they had built the roadway and perhaps want some dollars back. We've been assured that that is not a case. An additional concern that we had before we ever brought it to Transportation Committee was how this might affect the signalization of that intersection and potentially be something that would not be allowed to be signalized. And once again, we were assured that that is not the case. So our concerns were alleviated. We've heard from no public, and all parcels fronting on this roadway that benefit from this roadway are under Hood Dairy ownership.
Okay, thank you.
We're good.
If I may clarify, again, this action would help us to deny access to Route 11 from those two parcels if they were sold. As I've said, as you know, Route 11 is already traffic challenged anyway, and this would give those two parcels access to Route 11, but via Hood Way.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
one point of clarification. The resolution authorizes the notice of intent per the code section. It theoretically does provide for a public hearing, and the advertisement would suggest the possibility of a public hearing, but the public hearing only takes place if somebody asks for it, who's qualified to ask for it, and given that Hood is the only owner of the parcels, we're not anticipating that, but in the event somebody does, then when this comes back, it will be for public hearing, otherwise it will just be board action.
Good. Thank you. That helps.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Williams, for going into the intricacies of that, because, as I said, this resolution is just to advertise, have the clerk advertise our intent. There's not necessary to include the public hearing.
Yes, sir.
Further discussion, questions? Anyone?
Did we get a second on that motion?
I'm sorry?
Did we get a second on that motion?
I thought we did.
Yes,
Who
Yeah.
seconded it?
I did.
Gene?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we good?
We're good?
All right. Motion to adopt the resolution. Supervisor Slaughter.
Aye.
Supervisor Wells.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher.
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn. Supervisor Ewing.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
may I make one comment about items not requiring action?
Sure, where are you?
On item 3 on the transportation report,
Okay,
I just want to make a real brief comment.
okay.
I'm not at all happy with the state not supporting reducing the speed limit to 45 on Route 50 west through a very congested area that includes a school, a busy service station, a traffic light, and a fire station. I've asked the state to provide me with a copy of that study so I can review it, and I'll probably be back at a later date asking it be taken up again by the Transportation Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, that'll bring us to a public hearing, proposed ordinance, salaries of the Board of Supervisors. Who is presenting? Anyone?
I can speak to this
you.
ordinance. It's a required ordinance for the board to set salaries for the board members, and the amounts that are advertised are consistent with what you've already approved in your budget.
Okay,
That is $10,800 for the chair, $10,200 for the vice chair, and $9,000 for the other board members.
which is equivalent to no change.
Correct, no change.
Thank you. All right, are there any questions? All right, this is a public hearing. Would anyone like to comment concerning this proposed ordinance? Anyone at all? Anyone? All right, seeing no one, how would the board like to handle this one?
Mr. Chair, I would move to approve the ordinance setting the salaries for the Board of Supervisors for fiscal year 2017, 2018.
So we have a motion to approve the ordinance amendment. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
A second, is there any discussion? Anyone? Supervisor Ewing?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries. That will bring us to a public hearing, conditional use permit 05-17. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This conditional use permit before you, actually, if I can digress a little bit, these two conditional use permits before you are relatively new. If you recall, we adopted a change in our zoning ordinance that allows indoor rec within our M1 zoning districts with a conditional use permit. These two applications before you are just that. They're the first two we have. So just to refresh the board's memory, you know, I think we approved it last year, and these are the first two that came in front. With that, Mr. Chairman, the property, the Virginia Preferred Properties has a private gym, commercial indoor rec use. It'll be at 351 Victory Road. It's in Shawnee Magisterial District. It is currently zoned M1, light industrial, and its land use is warehousing. The surrounding properties to the north, south, and west are also zoned M1 light industrial, and their uses are manufacturing. To the east, their property is actually zoned RA, rural areas, and its use is residential. If I can turn your attention to the map on your left, gives you a layout of the property along Victory Road. It's in black. That's the zoning map, and there's the aerial photograph. This is a picture of the warehouses itself, and if you can bear with me, where this conditional use will take place is actually at the, sort of like the end cap right here of the property. Mr. Chairman, the Frederick County zoning ordinance that I pointed out before allows for commercial indoor rec within our M1 zoning districts with approved conditional use permit. This proposed gym will occupy 4,000 square feet within a warehouse area, 15,000 square feet in size. This gym will be a 24-hour operation. Prior to the operation of this gym, the applicant will need to submit a site plan, and a site plan to be submitted and approved by Frederick County. All plan improvements shall be implemented prior to operating the business. These improvements shall include a 20 parking spaces for this required use and design pick-up and delivery areas for all patrons of this use to provide safely access. It's a site plan that we have coming in. This property, because it is an industrial zone property, has to be brought up to date. It's an older property. However, part of your ordinance requirement under the ordinance change was that we have the adequate parking. Our parking is based on an indoor rec unit per the square footage that we have. This 4,000 square foot building, so it needs just 20 spaces for that particular use. Should the Board of Supervisors find this use to be appropriate, the Planning Commission recommended the following conditions be assigned to this conditional use permit. Number one, all agency review comments should be complied with at all times. And number two, a engineered site plan should be submitted to and approved by Frederick County and with a 6-month time frame, and all improvements are completed prior to establishment of the use. This gives the applicant some time to go ahead and get their engineering together, get the changes that they have in there. And the Planning Commission had added that condition on just to give them a little more time instead of getting an approval. As you know, if we approve the conditional use permit, they can go ahead and go forward. So they'll have that put in. And any expansion or change use require a new conditional use permit. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer any questions you have. And for the record, Mr. and Mrs. Forgel are here to answer any questions on the Virginia Preferred Properties commercial gym. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Questions, Mr. Chairman? Anyone? Yes, Supervisor Slaughter.
I did have a couple questions in reading the application, and one of the questions I had was, since it is going to be open 24 hours, is there proper lighting to accommodate evening hours?
The site plan will identify that. They have pack lighting, I believe, on and I'm going to let the applicant look at the site, walk with the applicant. I believe that we have lighting there, and it's sufficiently lit for safe egress and ingress.
And also, would you know about capacity requirements? Are there any in the CUP that limits the number of people in the gym at one time, or?
Yeah, what will happen is, you're well aware of the, as we review agency comments, once they get the change of use for that gym, we'll put an occupancy level on that, and that'll limit what they have in there.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Chair? Anyone? Thank you, sir. Ms. Frogale, anything you'd like to add?
No, sir. We appreciate you guys considering this, and anything that the county requires, we'll comply with.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, Mr. Frogale? Anyone? Thank you, sir. All right, this is a public hearing. Would anyone like to comment concerning this proposed CUP? Anyone at all? Anyone? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. How would the board like to handle this request?
Mr. Chairman, being Shawnee, I would move for approval of conditional use permit 05-17.
Motion to approve, is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Second, is there any discussion? Anyone? Supervisor Ewing?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries. Mr. Chairman,
Thank you again.
P number 0617.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. This property is located at 291 Independence Drive. It's in the Shawnee Magisterial District. It is currently, again, zoned M1, light industrial. Current use is warehouse. This is for a commercial indoor recreation use. Again, it's a softball training facility. If I could turn your attention to the zoning map on your left, gives you an outline of the property. This is the aerial photograph. This is a photograph of the property right now, as you're looking at. And again, where this indoor recreation facility is going to be taking place will be in this building right here. Currently, the second building on this property is vacant at this time. Again, the zoning ordinance allows for a commercial indoor recreation facility within our M1 zoning districts with the conditional use permit. This proposed softball training will take place in a 6,000 square foot building. The property has an approved site plan that meets the requirements for a safe pick up and drop off point. This property was developed about 9 years ago, and it's already set up for parking. However, with the way our zoning ordinance is written, we look at the square footage for assigning of parking. Currently, the property has only a total of 17 parking spaces. This commercial indoor rec use will require 30 parking spaces based on the square footage of the building. The applicant has engaged with an adjoining property owner to execute a shared parking agreement. This parking agreement allows for an additional 16 parking spaces, and it will allow the applicant to meet this requirement. The adjoining property is actually, and I don't know if you're familiar with, we have, there is at, can't get it to work. It's the adjoining property is the warehouse right there, and I apologize. Yeah, I apologize. The Planning Commission had some questions on that they're indicated in your conditions. One of them was that this adjoining property, which does meet the way our shared parking agreements are set up in the county. Actually, we've got about 3 of them in Frederick County to be exact. And just to give you a quick outline of what it means is basically it's safe egress and ingress. The properties have to be adjoining. Usually we look at some of the things that play into a shared parking agreement. The last one that the Frederick County did, a sizable one, was down on Commonwealth Court. It was for the sportsplex. You're right next, they did a shared parking agreement with Gander. You wouldn't have been the view of that because it's more of an administrative, the way our ordinances are written between the zoning administrator and adjoining property owners. What happens is you look for the total square footage of the building, you look for the hours of operation that the shared parking agreement is tied up to. For instance, the building that Mr. Jeffries, who's the applicant, is using, is a construction company. His operations are mostly on weekends. The construction company usually closes at 5 o'clock, so it meets our requirement of parking agreement. However, there is, as you know, in that industrial park, there is really no ingress and ingress in terms of sidewalks, crosswalks, and things of that nature. So what the Planning Commission, as part of the conditions, and the applicant worked through that, was to add some adequate lighting and show maybe a footpath there along the road. We'll work with that with the applicant. With that, the Planning Commission, if the Board of Supervisors find this to be appropriate, the Planning Commission assigned the following conditions to this conditional use permit. Number 1, the all review agency's comments shall be complied with at all times. Number 2, a shared parking agreement should be submitted to and approved by Frederick County prior to the use of the property as a commercial recreation facility to include lighting for pedestrians within a 6-month approval. Again, that's to give the applicant time to submit a plan to Frederick County and the parking agreement so we can review it and for him to implement. And number 3, any expansion or change use require a new conditional use permit. For the record, Mr. Thomas Jeffries is here to speak on this. He's the applicant on behalf of this application, and I'll answer any questions that you may have on this application. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Questions for Mr. Chair? Anyone?
I just have a couple of
Councilor Lofton.
questions. You've partially explained my concern, and that is pedestrians between the shared parking and this facility. It appears they're coming through some type of undeveloped piece of property there, and you talked about lighting for pedestrians, but will that pedestrian pathway be improved in any way? Is gravel path?
Yeah, if I could, again, I got the picture up here to kind of walk you through that, because basically, as you can see, the driveways almost line up.
Right.
What we're envisioning is that as a pathway, yes, probably a crushed gravel, just, not to have him expand the road in there unless, obviously, if you want that as a condition, we can, and some kind of lighting there. He does have, now there is lighting at the site where the parking is now. The concerns were, again, if you're walking, if it's darkened skies, I have been out there in the evening. I know that this is, CW Wright has lighting there, security lighting. It is, as you're pointing out, Mr. Lofton, to get the folks over to that building. That building, it's the second building on this property that is now, it's shuttered for all intents and purposes. It has security and lighting. The property owner keeps that on. I think there's enough of lighting on the site. It's getting from the right property over is something we'll work out with the applicant.
That's one of the things you'll
Yes, sir.
consider before.
In that 6-month period, yes, sir. That is one thing to do. I mean, it is, if you've been out there, I know a lot of board members do look at things, to go out there and look, and I know the planning commission, that was the same comment they had. Mr. Jeffries has already is going to be addressing that.
Thank you.
Other questions, Mr. Chairman? Anyone? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, is it possible that on the rear of the building, that lot continues back for quite some way? Could that be considered for parking use back there in any way that wouldn't require curb and gutter and asphalt and all that?
Being
Being M1, I'm not sure if that's,
There's actually I think in your application package, there's an original site plan we had that it was approved years ago. It calls for two phases at that site, at the owner's site. First phase is what you've seen on the pictures up there, had the parking. There's a second phase, to answer your question, Mr. Fisher, yes. That second phase calls for parking back there, and actually calls for, I believe, gravel parking, if I'm not mistaken, from what that site plan said back in, because this building originally was used for a roofing company, both buildings at one time. So yes, that could be a possibility.
Other questions for Mr. Chairman? Anyone? Thank you, sir. Mr. Jeffries, anything you'd like to add, sir?
I'd like to thank the board for hearing me and Mr. Lofton. It's about 85 feet of walkway from C.W. Wright's parking down to the existing parking we have now. What that picture didn't show, that was recently Comcast Cable has come in there and trenched and put in cable. I've contracted for years and I built patios. What the owners agreed to allow me to do is to put in a 21A crushed stone that's tampable, and I'm going to run about a 4-foot path down the side of that with solar lighting all the way down, and the owner of the building has agreed to allow me to do that. Mr. Fisher, I guess, in the back of that, it is gravel now, and there are concrete parking, what you'd see in any normal parking lot to pull up to. And people do, myself, I go back there and try to park. My wife and some of my coaches that would be coming in would park back there to allow our members the access to the front lot. And I'd just like to say that, 3 years ago, my daughter started playing softball. And I realized real quick, the kids in this county right now are disadvantaged to the kids in Warren County, the kids in Loudoun County. They all have a place to practice during the winter. We did win Frederick County's first Area 1 championship in girls softball this year. And these kids that want to strive to play college ball, they have to go over the mountain and pay $1,500, $2,000 for travel memberships at some other facility. And we're losing them. We're losing them over the mountain. I'd like to see kids start coming over the mountain to us. And that's why I started the facility and the training center. Thank you. Does anybody else have any?
Other questions, Mr. Jeffries? Anyone?
More question.
Supervisor Lofton.
The statement that's on the screen up there now asks if we may want to consider other uses to be permitted. Do you?
Okay.
I'm sorry. Wrong person?
Well, I apologize for that. There wasn't, that was for, if the board had any questions, Mr. Lofton, because he is doing a softball facility. We consider it all indoor rec, and that was one of the, if there had been any questions up, that was sort of a throw out that if the board wanted to add that, hey, this could only be used for softball, and if he would go, if this applicant, let's say got bigger, would you put a additional condition for, let's say, for instance, indoor, for lack of a better word, a gymnastics? Would they have to come back in front of you for that? It's still indoor rec. Indoor rec is indoor rec. It's parking. Nothing would change. It was just because it was a softball facility he's got set up there now.
So we're not being asked to, or maybe we are being asked to consider this as the softball use.
Or just keep it as indoor rec.
Just keep it, right, okay,
That's what that was. And that was just something in case you had some questions on that when I was trying to get the picture for you.
So if we consider the CUP as indoor recreation, that doesn't limit what could go in there?
No, as long as it meets our,
Unless we want to limit it?
unless you wanted it, yes. Because the indoor rec, to be honest with you, not to be honest, to be truthful, is the way, the key things, I think when we brought this forward to the board through the planning commission to our committees, parking and safety was the biggest question. This applicant has definitely met that, even with the shared parking. The applicant before has definitely met that. That's what the site plan requirements. The only caveat with this one, Mr. Jeffries wants to do softball there. Let's say Mr. Jeffries leaves in a year. Let's say Mark Charon wants to go in there and do a gymnastics. Are we comfortable with having an indoor rec, or do you want to add that they need to come back in front of you? That's what that was for.
What would give us the most flexibility in this particular, what would your recommendation be for flexibility?
Just indoor rec.
Just indoor rec?
Yes, sir.
I think it'd be best to leave it, this indoor rec. Building code's going to dictate capacity issues, parking, all that. And I think to leave it, to give it the most flexibility, I think the indoor rec is
Between the
appropriate.
building officials and the fire marshal.
Yes.
They'll cover it.
Okay.
Sorry for the confusion, but that was just in case you might have had some questions on that. I apologize.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions at all? All right, this is a public hearing. Would anyone like to comment concerning this proposed CUP? Anyone? Anyone at all? All right, seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. Discussion? How would the board like to handle it? I believe this one is also Shawnee.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I would move for approval of conditional use permit 06-17.
Motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Mr.
And
Chairman.
a second. Is there any further discussion? Anyone? Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Ewing?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries. Thank you, sir. What's next? Discussion on medical offices in the RP and RA. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. This is a proposed zoning text amendment to add the medical offices as a conditional use in the RP residential performance in the RA rural area zoning district. As you recall, this item was previously discussed at your April 12th Board of Supervisors meeting. At that meeting, staff was directed to revise the supplementary use regulation to address some concerns. Those concerns have been addressed, and I'll just real quickly, if you turn to your screen to your left, I outlined them in yellow, were some of the recommendations that were brought forth to staff to bring back to you all to make, or the board, I should say, excuse me. And basically, the use must front and be accessed via collector or arterial roadway. Number 2 on the change, the primary use of the structure shall be a doctor's office. And number 3, the use shall not be located within a residential subdivision or development. Staff is seeking direction from the Board of Supervisors as to where this item is ready to be presented for public hearing. I'll try to answer any questions that you may have on this proposed ordinance amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Mr. President.
So there's a few questions I have. One is the use shall not be located within a residential development. I'm not being picky, I'm just trying to get a feel. Is it with, can you expand on that a little bit more? Is it like within a quarter mile, half mile, out in the middle of nowhere? How does that fit?
Within is within. And for instance, if it was a subdivision that was already had houses in it that was full up, that would be your residential subdivision or development that was already just plain RP, residential performance. I suspect in our RA zoning district, it would be most likely your, we don't do too many of them anymore, but would be your rural preservation tracts that you have. They have 2-acre properties, they're basically housing, and we have that 60-foot set aside. You wouldn't be allowed to do it there.
This particular project, is there a specified thought on where this is going to go?
Again, it would still have to meet, no, it would be those zoning districts, but.
This is a general discussion, not for a specific.
Right. For what you're saying, Mr. Dunn, let me throw, for instance, out there, I'm going to use your district, for instance, Cincinnati Road, you have a lot of RP along Cincinnati Road right there. Say I want to come in and open a doctor's office there. Okay, I have to meet the B2 parking standards and design standards, but it's RP. There's nothing around that subdivision, or no subdivision around there. So then this ordinance will allow me to come forward and do that.
Okay.
It's mostly for infill, if you will, for lack of a better.
And then my related question is, so in an area like Redbud, where there is one Cincinnati, plenty of development, I understand that.
Yeah.
If you move that to a much more rural area, Back Creek, you know, or Gainsborough, someplace like that, is there current business traffic there, i.e., you know, an archery range or a golf range or something like that, where this would change? I'm trying to figure out how much traffic potentially would go, so it would affect, an RA is designed as an RA area. I'm just trying to see how much of this type of a situation would change that RA to more of a business as opposed to leaving it the RA that it's designed to be. It's a general question.
And most of your business-type opportunities that come in front of this board, I think, are the conditional use permits. And it's same question when you review that. For instance, if you're on any of our roads, Route 600, Back Creek Road, yeah, it's property specific. Now, also what this use could be used for, and I think this board, a couple of members have been for a while, remember our rural community centers, and we were always looking for something there when we did all our studies. One of our rural community centers, I think, even though it's a rezoning, it may not be where the Partlow Insurance is on 522, for instance, Reading Landscaping. Now, they're zoned, but let's just say today they were RA out there. If this ordinance is approved by the board, I could come in as, again, a doctor, want to open an office over there. I would still have to meet our B2 zoning district parking, which is very important because, to answer your question about the parking and things of that nature, and two, the design standards. So you couldn't just, throw something in where our B2 design standards are your parking, your lighting, things that you normally see. Now, it's fronting on a collector road or major arterial. In the RA, that would be a concern. You would probably not have it on some small road. It's a 50-foot right-of-way because we're calling out a collector and arterial roadway. So that would be your major 522, 50 Back Creek Road.
So what I hear you saying is that this would allow for some type of a medical facility in an RA area. If a person's or a company decide to specifically put a specific item there, it will go through another set of reviews to deal with traffic impact, et cetera. Is that correct?
It would be a site plan, that's correct. That would identify that. And I guess in the RA, not to belabor it, but the RA too, there's a lot of, as you're well aware of, Mr. Dunn, there's a lot of other things that go in there. Your drain field, your water usage, so that would play an important part of what you have.
All you're trying to do is to add another type of business that potentially could be in that area. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? Supervisor Lofton?
So to kind of follow up on the conversation we just had, let me put out a scenario. You could not locate this office in Shawnee Land, but you could locate it on Back Mountain Road in front of Shawnee Land.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not that anything's going to go there, but just thought that'd be a good example.
I think if you just think it as, to close it, to bring it back, I think if you just think of all the infill and smaller properties we have in those sort of zoning districts, I know we deal with that along the two major corridors I could think of really is like Route 11 North. When we try to get a rezoning in here, you have to try to put a whole conglomerate of properties together, but let's say I have a smaller property, want to do that, we can do it there if it's RP or RA. That's the best example I can come up with. Of course, Mr. Dunn, as he pointed out in his district along Cincinnati, it's the same way, so.
Other questions, Mr. Chairman, anyone?
So one more.
Yes, sir.
We're considering that the practice is going to be identified with SIC code or with the attachment that you've put here, which identifies what is medical and what is not?
That is correct.
Okay.
Others? Questions? Supervisor Dunn?
One other question. In the RA areas, you have some stores, gas stations, et cetera, which have traffic moving in and out. Do you have any idea of approximately what type of traffic goes into a doctor's office? I mean, do you have, 15 people a day, 20 people a day? Is it substantially different from either a country store or substantially different from a gas station in a more rural area?
That's hard to qualify, to be honest with you.
Trying to get
yeah.
a feel. Thank you.
To add to that, that's why it's a CUP, case-by-case consideration of the application and its parameters of it, the location, et cetera.
Okay.
That's part of the value of the CUP process. It's a case-by-case basis.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Hopefully not complicate the discussion. We allow veterinary clinics now under the same conditions. So it's, you know, it's very comparable in terms of the impacts to the surrounding properties. So I think it would, number one, it would have to make sense for a medical office to locate wherever they're looking to locate. They're not going to drop one in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And the CUP allows you to place conditions on it relative to the specifics of whatever property they want to locate on. And then they've got to do a site plan and meet all the review agency requirements. So there's a lot of stopgap measures in place to try and ensure that it's an appropriate facility in the end.
So I think that you were looking for any additional input that you might receive and a decision about whether or not to send it back to the PC for formal consideration.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor?
Mr. Chairman, the three conditions that were added really addressed those issues that I had that I brought up, and I'll make the motion that we send it forward to public hearing at this time.
Do we need a motion?
Second.
We have one. So is there further discussion?
I just
Yes,
have
sir.
one more
Supervisor
question, and I don't want to get too far down the weeds on this, but your SIC classifications that you've got listed here, is that all inclusive? In other words, I don't see chiropractic here. Are they considered doctors?
I'm like, yes, sir. Yeah. Just to go on the SIC real quick, yes, we would look at that as it's a doctor.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
That is, you know.
So we have a motion and a second to send it forward to the PC for formal consideration and a public hearing. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Thank you, sir. All right. I think that brings us to board liaison reports. Are there any? Anyone? All right. Citizen comments on any issue that you might like to bring to the board's attention. Is there anyone? Yes, sir. You can have your name, magisterial district, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
I'm Larry Allen Clouser Webb. I'm from Warren County, but tonight I just want to remind members of the board that this weekend, May 13th, is the 25th anniversary of Stamp Out Hunger. Last year, our drive collected over 44,000 pounds of food from Frederick County, City of Winchester, and Clark counties. Even though it sounds like a lot of food, most of it won't last more than 3 months. In fact, when you think about it, the Highland Church feeds between 110 and 130 families a week. I want to thank all the people and generous citizens of Frederick County, the City of Winchester, and Clark County for contributing to people that are less needy than what we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Anything at all? Anyone? All right. Board of Supervisors comments. Supervisor Fisher.
Mr. Chairman, I need to apologize. I left out an item under the Public Works Committee report.
Okay.
Block thing on my iPad blocked it out there, and I
Think
missed
we
it.
have an issue with going back to that, do we, Mr. Williams? I don't think so. All right, sir.
At the Public Works meeting, there was a discussion on the replacement of the Clearbrook Convenience Center, the Citizens Convenience Center. At the end of this year, our current lease on the current property expires. And Public Works has been looking at numerous sites over the last several years and has not really been able to find something very satisfactory. At this time, the Frederick County Sanitation Authority has recently purchased property and is willing to give us a site there that would work very well. It's going to need some minor improvements for the site work, but it seems like it would work very well. What the Public Works Committee approved through a motion, and it was recommending that we move forward with the design process, and if the Board of Supervisors is in agreement. So I think maybe we need some kind of a direction. I don't know if you want that in the form of a motion authorizing Public Works to continue. And I think there's no appropriations needed at this time with the design, but just letting staff know they can go ahead and proceed with the design of this convenience site center there on the, what's referred to as the Bachman property that the Frederick County Sanitation Authority owns.
Okay, so let's come back to the motion question. Anyone else have questions or comments? Are we sure that no appropriation at this time?
There's money set aside in the capital contingency fund for,
Thought there was. So capital contingency fund's the source of funding. Other questions?
Quick question.
Yes, sir, Supervisor Dunn.
Mr. Fisher, is this the best site, only site, or is this a preliminary? We think this is, I'm just looking at a...
It's a great site. It has utilities that are not far away. The land's, it's not perfectly flat, but it's relatively flat compared to other sites. Other sites we've looked at have problems with stacking for citizens. It backs them up into public right-of-way. Here we've got plenty of room to do this. So the site really is the best. It's the best one that I have seen, and in the past, Mr. Strawsteiner and I have looked at quite a few.
So you've gone through and seen other sites, and among the choices that you had available, this is the best site from those choices, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions, comments? Want to restate your motion?
Okay, do I need to restate that with the use of the capital contingency fund for the design? I don't have a figure.
Already reserved for
It's
that
already
purpose.
reserved for that, so it's just a,
heard anything, but you don't need to do
okay,
it.
it's just
Move forward.
move forward with the design of the convenience, of the new convenience site on the
Stonewall.
Bachman property. Stone.
Thanks. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second, is there further discussion? Just to add to your question, Supervisor Dunn, it really is an outstanding site. We've looked at a bunch. Any further discussion? Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Ewing?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries. So I'm glad you caught that. Thank you, sir. Does anyone else have anything?
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Dunn?
We are fortunate to live in a free country. We are fortunate to have the opportunity to vote. There are two parties in the Commonwealth of Virginia, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. On May 22nd, the Republican Party will choose nominees for Red Bud and Opequon. There will be 2 candidates in Red Bud, there will be 3 candidates in Opequon. So if you want to have an opportunity to vote for a representative in those 2 on the Republican side, please come out to the mass meeting on May 22nd, Monday. Be in line before 7 o'clock. Registration begins at 6 o'clock. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Gainsborough, not Opequon.
I apologize. It's Gainsborough. It's Red Bud in Gainsborough. I apologize.
Thank you, sir.
I've been worried there for a minute.
Any other
I thought I
comments?
missed something, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Fisher?
Move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Motion to adjourn, is there a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, no. We'll stand adjourned.